Hi, welcome to LPC Online. I'm Pastor Doug and I want to thank you for joining us today, especially those who are watching for the first time. If you'd like to connect with us, you can go to our website, listoolpc.com, and leave us a message. We really hope that God uses this time to help you grow in your faith and be encouraged.
God of Abraham, you're the God of covenant and faithful promises. Time and time again, you have proven you do just what you said. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness. So I'll stand still until it sinks in. And I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. Sing it out. Your love sustaining me before I even knew what love was. You brought me here to rest and given me space to breathe. So I'll stand still until it sinks in. And I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. Breathe. than all of the others that I've seen. I'm breathing deep of all your goodness, your loving kindness to me. We thank you, Lord, your loving kindness, your loving kindness. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. Sing it out. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, Lord, mending every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Come on, sing it out. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Come on. That is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Sing it out. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 That is who you
How many of you have dreams? Things you want to accomplish or experience in life? How many of you would say you have God-given dreams? Or specific things that you know are from God that He has placed in your life and they've become a burning passion or something that is driving you to achieve a goal that you know is beyond your inclination. It's from God. How many of you have accomplished these dreams? How many of you have actually had those dreams go how you expected them to go, and the path to accomplish them has gone exactly how you strategized or you predicted? I think if we're being totally fair and honest, most of us, if not all of us, would say that nothing has gone the way we planned. Nothing has worked out the way we thought it was. In fact, all aspects of life continually come with surprises. Unexpected or expected surprises just not happening the way we thought they would. And it's unique and interesting because this seems to become the common element in life. That nothing ever goes the way we expect them to. We may make plans, we may have great plans, we may go into details of strategizing all we're going to accomplish. But as that great philosopher, Mike Tyson, said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Now, for those who don't know Mike Tyson, he was a boxer, and I'm sure he was a brilliant philosopher before he got punched in the face 50 million times. But what he said is still fully true. We all have a plan. We all have things worked out until life and our circumstances just give us a punch in the face. And then suddenly, everything gets thrown out the window. and we need to keep evolving and adapting. And this is an ongoing mantra. In fact, one of the biggest strategies that generals often say is you can battle plan as much as you want, and it's perfect until the first bullet fires. But what makes a good leader, or a person who can truly rise above those surprises, is someone who can adapt quickly and change. And I think it's vital for us to recognize and understand that life is often like this. In fact, from one of my favorite movies, there's a movie called Rudy, and it's about this young, undersized guy who dreams of playing football at Notre Dame, has real desires for it, and he just is not a football player. He's not the most athletic, he's not built the right way, he's not big enough, but he does not give up on his dream. He keeps pushing continually after it, never giving up, never surrendering. And one of the things that I love is in one moment where he is frustrated, he is so frustrated right now, he proceeds to go to this Catholic priest that he develops a relationship with. His name is Father Kavanaugh. And he brings his struggles and his frustrations and just gives them to the Catholic father and says, you don't understand all of this, but I just need to get it off of my shoulder. I need your help and encouragement. And Father Kavanaugh responds and says, son, in 35 years of religious study and service, I have come up with only 2 irrefutable facts. There is a God, and I am not God. I may think I have everything figured out. I may think I know what's best for my life, what's best for me to do, but I've discovered something. I am not God. God has a plan, and he may have a perfect plan, but I don't know it. And every time I try to strategize, I will take my own will and try to put it over top of God's. And God not only is bigger than us, he not only is more intelligent, but he often works in ways that defy human logic. He is a mysterious God because he is so much bigger than our understanding. God moves in mysterious ways. And whenever we try to put him in a box, we limit him. Now, this is something that Paul experiences. It's something that many of us experience. In fact, if you go through and read the Bible, you'll find story after story of people who encounter God doing things differently. Different than expected, different than they would have done, but God doing things right. And in the passage I want to read to you today, which is going to be in Acts 27, it is a wonderful account of God showing up and his will being done, but in the most unexpected ways. And I want to start off with the fact that, again, we know Paul is being directed by God towards Rome. He is going to Rome, but not in the ways that Paul or anyone else would have expected him to go. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is that God is sending Paul to Rome not as a passenger, but as a prisoner. He is on board a boat being transported as a prisoner. And this is where our passage starts, where our account begins. I'm going to be reading verses 1 to 4 at this point. It starts off when it says, when the time came, we set sail for Italy. Paul and several other prisoners were placed in the custody of a Roman officer named Julius. Now he was a captain of the imperial regiment. Now Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was also with us. We left on a ship whose home port was Amdramatium, on the northwest coast of the province of Asia. It was scheduled to make several stops at ports along the coast of the province. Now, putting out to sea, or the next day when we docked at Sidon, Julius was very, very kind, and he let Paul go ashore to visit with friends so they could provide for his needs. Then putting out to sea from there, we encountered strong headwinds that made it difficult to keep the ship on course. Our journey, or Paul's journey in this passage, begins with a very unexpected start. Yes, Paul is traveling from where he was, which was Caesarea, to Rome on a ship as a prisoner, not a passenger. He's not paying his way. He doesn't have rights and privileges. He's not being serviced or taken care of by these sailors and people on the ship. No, he is there as a prisoner under guard. And the actual commander of the guard that's over top of him could have treated him with little to no humanity, little to no care and compassion. In fact, the traditional way for Roman soldiers to treat prisoners was with brutality and with little to no empathy or compassion at all. The only job they had was to keep them in place from escaping and to show up alive. Now, what condition they were in when they got there, that didn't matter. They just had to be alive. But this commander was very different. Julius was actually kind and showed great favor to Paul. This was God again starting to show up in a mysterious way. Even though Paul was a prisoner, God still showed him favor through a Roman commander who treated Paul with great respect through this entire passage, this entire journey that they were on, the voyage, if you will. And what's interesting with this too is he lets him go ashore and find people who will care for him, who will give him the supplies that he needs, and whatever he needs to have comfort on his journey. He allowed him to be treated like a human and to have dignity and have support and friends. He also allowed Luke to travel with him. That's why this passage identifies the wording as we. We then did this. As we set sail, there were many people with Paul. Luke is with him, as well as Aristarchus, who is a friend of Paul's. Prisoners were not given support and friends and visitors. It was not something that they normally did. But in Paul's case, he was given great favor. This is God working in not the expected way, but still a very good way. And it doesn't stop there. The next thing that's different is God sends Paul to be a voice on this journey, to be an actual consultant that people listen to, even as a prisoner. But he was never the captain. God could have easily put Paul in charge of the boat, in charge of all of this journey, but that was not the way that God chose to work. Now I want to read from verses 7 down to verses 13. Listen to what happens. We had several days of slow sailing. Again, Paul's identifying the plural. We had several days of slow sailing. And after great difficulty, we finally neared Cnidus. But the wind was against us, so we sailed across to Crete and along the sheltered coast of the island, past the Cape of Salome. We struggled along the coast for many days with great difficulty and finally arrived at Fair Havens, near the town of Lasea. We had lost a great deal of time, and the weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was so late in the fall. And Paul spoke to the ship's officer about it. Now, what's interesting, just even in that initial place, is they've encountered great difficulty. Their journey is not going the way it's supposed to. This was not an easy journey. God's favor didn't extend to the traveling conditions. He didn't give the boat wonderful conditions to get Paul to Rome as soon as possible. In fact, he brought difficulty after difficulty. So the ship finally managed to make it all the way over to the coast where they wanted to settle at a port called Fair Havens. And then Paul decides to speak to the ship's officer about what's going on. He is identifying himself and having a voice, which is odd. Prisoners are not given that luxury, but God gave Paul that favor. And Paul says, "Men," in verse 10, "I believe there's trouble ahead if we go on, shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to all of our lives as well." So he's fully expressing his opinion. He's not holding anything back. He's not saying, "Would you consider my opinion? Would you entertain a prisoner?" He's saying, no, listen, men, you need to get this. I believe there's trouble coming up because of what's going to happen. And it's going to be shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well. But the officer in charge, Julius, decided to listen instead more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. And since Fair Havens was an exposed harbor, a poor place to spend the winter, most of the crew wanted to go on to Phoenix, further up the coast of Crete, and to spend the winter there. Phoenix was a good harbor with only southwest and northwest exposure. So this is a very important part here. This gives us just a little bit of a window into, again, Paul having some favor from God, but not enough favor for Paul to be like, listen, we can avoid all of this issue. We can make it simple and we can get all the way we need to go safely to Rome without a shipwreck, a loss of cargo, and a threat to all of our lives. But God didn't give Paul that authority. He chose to work differently. He chose to force Paul and all of these sailors to undergo hard sailing, soon to become difficult and dangerous sailing, in order for them to come to the place where they needed to be. This was God working out things differently. I'm sure Paul could have said, oh God, I've already put together my entire schedule, my itinerary, if you will. And if everything does this, I will be able to get to Rome when I need to. Things will be perfect. It will be a wonderful and relaxing journey that I'll be able to enjoy and get life into before I walk into the challenge that awaits me in Rome. But God had other plans. God had a lot of other plans. And then things became even more interesting because as they are trying to figure out when to leave and how to leave, because the ship captain and the ship owner have identified this and determined it needs to happen, they start to have a shift in the weather. And it brings them this moment of total satisfaction. And they believe that they're right and Paul's wrong. We're going to be reading at verse 13. This is where things get a little interesting. Verse 13 says, when a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it. So they pulled up the anchor and sailed across the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly. And a wind of a typhoon strength called the northeaster burst across the island and blew out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. We sailed along the sheltered side of the small island called Cauda, where with great difficulty, we hoisted aboard the lifeboat being towed behind us. Then the sailors bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it and to keep it from being driven across, literally to strengthen it so it wouldn't be ripped apart. They were afraid of being driven across the sandbars of Syrtis off the Africa coast, so they lowered the sea anchor to slow the ship, and they were driven before the wind. Here's where Paul is brought before them now as a messenger. God decides to send Paul as a messenger to all of the crew, all of the soldiers, and all the other prisoners. But God doesn't give Paul a wonderful message. In fact, he gives him bad news. He becomes the bearer of bad news, which usually makes him the enemy. When someone comes along with you with continually bad news, you don't want to be around those people. In fact, you want to push them away. But then God used Paul to also be a source of hope. And this is, again, God choosing to work in a very unexpected and mysterious way. Verse 18 is where we're going to start. The next day, as the gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began to throw cargo overboard. Now, for them to do that, it meant that they were going to lose all of their profit. All of the money they were making, all of the work they would put in so far would be worth nothing if they lost their cargo. But they threw their cargo overboard because they were that terrified. Then the following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. The stuff they needed to be able to sail the ship properly to stay alive. They were throwing that overboard just to stay afloat. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone. Here's where I think it's very interesting too, because literally God is saying, and Luke was recording, all hope is gone. And then we see God lead Paul to speak. No one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and said, "Men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete." Now, that's not the best way to make friends. Listen, I told you guys to do something different, but you chose to not listen to me. And because of that, now you are facing the consequences. I told you so. Paul is again the bearer of bad news. You would have avoided all the damages and the loss, but take courage. none of you will lose your lives. None of you are going to die, even though the ship is going to go down. For last night an angel of the Lord, whom I belong, whom I serve, stood before me and beside me. And he said, don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage. Again, he repeats that. Take courage. Don't be afraid, for I believe God. It will be just as he said. Yes, we will be shipwrecked on an island, but none of you will lose your lives. Paul is the bearer of bad news. You think it's bad now. We are going to get shipwrecked. This ship is going down. And you could have listened to me in the first place and avoided all of this, but you chose not to. But take courage, because God in his goodness is fully aware of where we are. He's fully aware of what we're going through. And he is sovereign over even the storm, even the waves, and everything that's going on in the sea that we cannot control, that is beyond us, in the weather that we can't even handle. Even all of the experienced soldiers and sailors who are used to this sort of thing can't handle it. But God is stronger, and none of you will lose your lives. No one is going to die. God will protect each and every one of us. And that is Paul coming to bring hope. Hope to them in the time where they need it the most. Hope when they have no other reason to believe or have faith. But God sends Paul. Now, what's also interesting is God doesn't stop there. In fact, God sends Paul not as a pastor to a church, which he's used to. This is the way Paul normally is sent on a missions trip, to go pastor a church or pastor a group of leaders in the church so that the gospel can spread. Well, in this case, God has sent Paul to a ship full of prisoners, soldiers, and sailors, not as a pastor, but still as a shepherd to care for these people and to save them. God working again in the unexpected way, but in a way that is right and it's best. Verse 33 is where it starts. In verse 33, something incredible happens. And we get to see a little bit more of where things reach their climax. Now it says in 33, just as day was dawning, Paul urged everyone to eat, for they had not touched food now for 2 weeks. He says, you have been so worried, you haven't touched food for 2 weeks. What kind of a person purposely does not eat food for 2 weeks? I struggle with not eating food for 2 hours. And people do not eat food for 2 weeks. They are so distressed and disturbed they can't even focus on eating. But it's interesting here, he says, please eat something now for your own good, for not a hair on your heads will perish. Then he took some bread, gave thanks to God before them all, and broke off a piece and ate it. Then everyone there was encouraged, and they all began to eat. All 276 of us who were on board the ship. After eating, the crew lightened the ship further by throwing the cargo of wheat overboard. They were at a place where they were at their wits' end. They were at their limit. Things had gotten so bad that they were convinced that they were going to die. They had not eaten for 2 weeks. And Paul is there caring for these people on a physical nature and saying you need to eat your food. On a spiritual level, bringing encouragement, bringing them life, drawing their attention to a God who had given them a promise and saying you do not need to be afraid. God said that not even a hair on your head will be harmed. So have hope and be able to have that hope give you the ability to keep living, to keep fighting, to not give up. And it's incredible to see that as all of this happens, everything that God predicted was going to happen came to pass. Everything that God spoke through Paul about exactly happened as predicted. When the morning comes and they can see where they are off the coast and they are moving close towards an island that they don't recognize. They try their best to throw down anchors to stop the ship from getting there, but the waves are driving it so strongly that they literally slowly have to say, okay, what's our choice? What are we going to do? So they steer the ship in and try to drive it into the coast so they can ground the ship. but it hits a sandbar, and then the waves literally beat the hull to the point where the ship falls apart. It just disintegrates, and every single person has to jump overboard. And this is after already the sailors have tried to abandon ship. They've tried to take the lifeboat and leave, but the soldiers cut it off so that they stay together because the promise was given that no harm would come to them. And Julius trusted Paul that much that he believed it would happen. And so all of these people jump out of the ship. They find every way possible to get to shore. Those who swim, swim. Those who can't literally hang on top of some form of debris so they float to the shore. And guess what? They all make it to the island alive. No one is injured, no one dies. Just like God provided. And when they reach this island, they are actually greeted with hospitality. The people care for them. In fact, they give them everything they need to survive until they can travel safely to get to Rome. God shows up with miracle after miracle after miracle to save all of them, to protect all of them, to work in the process so that Paul has the care he needs, is protected, is allowed to come to the island, and every single thing he does is miraculous yet unexpected. And doesn't seem to make human sense. Why would you do this, God? Why wouldn't you just let the ship sail safely from where it had to leave in Caesarea all the way over to Rome? What did you gain from putting them through the torment of this storm? You could have easily protected them from the weather. We learned from Jesus that you are greater than the storm and you can calm it with a word. Then why didn't you? Because God had different plans. And because of this action that took place, because of this whole process, this journey, there are now 276 people who recognize that there is a God who is miraculous, who is greater than the storms, who is a miracle worker, who actually gives wisdom, who is there with Paul. And what Paul spoke on after that, he would have had every person listening. Think of the authority that God just gave Paul when he shares the gospel with all of those people. Now they have every reason to listen and to believe that there is truly a God who is greater than all of the storms of life, who can provide miracle after miracle, and is calling them to follow him. We serve a God who is very, very different. He's not like us, and in many ways, he's exactly like us. He works mysteriously, but he works perfectly. And our call that we're given as his followers is to have faith in him and to continue to obey. To trust him when we don't see him working, when we don't recognize how he's working, or we don't understand why he's doing these things. But God says, will you follow me? And if we do, his will that will be accomplished is always better than our plans. Because his will is better than our perfect plans. Because our perfect plans are not perfect at all. And in many ways, they're usually very selfish. And God's plans are concerned with everyone that's involved, not just us and ourselves and what we want to accomplish in life. God is caring about every person in this world, all the souls that are in this world, and he is striving to do his best to bring hope, light, and salvation to them. And if we choose to submit to him, he will use us in our life to accomplish that plan. Are we willing to trust him, even when things don't make sense? Let's say a word of prayer. Father, we are thankful for the fact that you truly are sovereign. You are bigger than us. You're bigger than our understanding. You're bigger, in fact, than our entire universe. May we remember that so that we can recognize that when your word comes, when you bring guidance and direction that doesn't make sense to us and we don't agree with, may we remember that your will is truly perfect. And that even when we don't recognize how you're working or why you're doing things, may we have the faith to keep trusting. We serve a God who works in mysterious ways, but we serve a God who is faithful and truly perfect. And may that be our source of faith so that we can keep trusting you and keep following through the storms in our life. We thank you for our patience with us, God, and we ask that you would continue to keep giving us that grace so that we can learn to do this better every single day and to trust you completely with every aspect of our life and every choice that you're calling us to make. We ask and we pray for this today, for all of us who are hearing this, in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, my prayer for you that I want to take is actually a benediction as well. And it's taken right from Numbers. It's the first priestly blessing that was given, the Levite blessing. And it says, as we are following God, may he bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you today and be gracious to you. And may the Lord show you his favor in everything that is coming and give you his peace to keep following him. Amen? Amen. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for listening to this. And I pray that God's truth is what connects with you today, and he's able to continue to draw you deeper into relationship with him. Have a blessed week, and take care.